But you were never mine to keep, seedling. You were mine to teach. I will always love you.
Concrete. Disinfectant. 4 minutes on the clock. Quasi came up out of the dark with his mouth split open and said the one thing Elias had crossed a country in order not to hear. They want me to sign. Tonight. Then don't. Seedling. Quasi's hands closed on the bars, indigo still driven under the nails. They have stopped asking. Somewhere behind him, a steel door went twice. Whatever you were going to do it by Friday. 11 miles north, in a cream car that smelled of bergamot and money, Amma said, "You promised this child a name. I want to hear you say it." Danso watched the road unspool. We will see where things land. Where things land. These matters take shape, Amma. He smiled at the windscreen, never at her. You have been very useful. Useful. She turned the word over in the dark and found there was no future anywhere inside it. She looked down at her hands. No ring. He had taken it back in June for cleaning. 8 years a wall for one man. 4 months a convenience for another. She had not traded up. She had changed cages. Elias found her at midnight on the hill road, walking, no shoes, no bag. He had come to scream. He got 3 words out. "You did this," before she said without stopping, "Yes, and I am the only one who can undo it." Why? Because he called me useful. The wind came hard off the water. My mother's house in Ada, a folder, the account that paid 11 officers to raid that party. She looked at him. My name is in it too. Below them, the coast lay black and breathing, tin roofs, drying nets, the flat gray rectangle where a mural used to be. 3 days until they buried a painter in a filing cabinet. Make the earth remember. Efua Asare's office was a converted shipping container behind a chop bar in Osu, and it was 10 degrees cooler inside than anywhere Elias had been in a week. She cleared a chair by moving a stack of files to the floor, where there were already 9 stacks, each one a person. Friday, 10 o'clock Cape Coast, she said. They will read a public indecency charge. That charge is not the point. It is a lever, and what it is levering is 4 hectares of Jamestown seafront that has belonged to fishing families since before there was a Ghana to belong to. She pushed her glasses up with one knuckle. They did not arrest a lover, Elias. They arrested an obstacle. So we proved the land, Elias said. Efua almost laughed. We proved the land in 11 months, if we are lucky, and nobody dies, and the file does not go missing twice. We have 3 days. She took a sheet of paper and drew a plain rectangle on it and turned it to face him. A case is a mural, she said. You do not start with the face. Everyone wants to start with the face. You start with the wall. Who owns it? Who has swept in front of it for 40 years? Who says you may stand there? Ground first, then color. Something in him that had been drowning since the hill put its foot down and found the bottom. If this story is already moving you, take 1 second to like and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing Black love stories like this one to life. KJ came in without knocking, sunglasses shoved up into his bleached coils, and set a black hard drive on the desk, the way a man lays down a card he has prayed all week he would not have to play. Everything, he said. 70 minutes, 4 phones, my compound, my party, my people going over my own wall. He did not sit. 6 years I have spent teaching this country that we are beautiful. Every reel, every photograph. That was the entire project. He looked at the drive and not at them. Now I am going to teach it what it did instead. His voice was completely level and his hands were not. They watched it twice. Strobe light, sequins, a whistle, a rush of bodies going over a wall in a direction bodies are not built to go. Kwesi's shoulder in a doorway, and then Kwesi's shoulder in a van. And at 41 minutes and 16 seconds, at the very edge of frame, a dark car that never moves. Ifua stopped it there and let it sit. "That is a car," she said. "It is not an order. A magistrate cannot hear a car." The generator outside coughed and steadied. "Somewhere there is paper, a payment, a permit, a name on a line. Bring me the paper and this becomes a weapon. Without it, it is grief with a soundtrack. And I have watched grief lose in that building 40 times. Auntie Akosua did not ask what had happened. She put a bowl down in front of him. Groundnut soup, far too hot, the exact burnt orange of the ochre they had ground out of Shea Hill's clay in his second week, and stood over him with her arms folded until every spoonful was gone. Then the compound began to fill. A woman from 2 lanes over with a child on her hip. 2 fishermen who would not sit. A boy of about 14 who had once been allowed to hold a bucket while Kwesi worked. Nobody had called a meeting. Akosua had simply left her gate standing open at dusk, and in Jamestown, an open gate at dusk is a complete sentence in a language everyone on that coast has spoken since birth. Afua gave him a school exercise book, 40 pages, ruled, the kind that cost 2 cedis. Every family on that seafront, name, house, how long they have been in it. Not a petition. A petition is an opinion, and the court has a drawer for opinions. This is a record. So Elias walked the lanes with a borrowed pen and learned the thing that would quietly organize the rest of his life. That you cannot argue a community into existing, and you cannot import one, and you certainly cannot rescue one. You can only go house by house in the doorway in the evening when people are tired and cooking and ask whether they would like to be counted, and then write down exactly and without improving it whatever they say. 11 doors did not open. A man mending net outside the 12th listened to the whole thing without once stopping his hands, and then said without heat, "You are leaving in August." Elias began to answer and found that he could not, because it was true, and because the man had said it the way you state a tide, not an accusation, a condition. "When you go," the fisherman said, "they will still know my name and my house, and how long. You are asking me to write down for a stranger a list of everything they can take from me." He bit the twine through. "Bring me something that stays." And he went back to the net, and Elias stood in the dark lane and understood that he had not yet earned one single thing here. The first yes came from a woman called Na Dede, 81 years old, who had sold smoked herring on the same corner since 1962. She did not ask what the book was for. She took it in both hands the way you hold a thing to feel its weight before you decide about it and said, "The boy painted my grandson on that wall, second from the end, in the blue." Then she dictated her name and her house and 63 years, and made him read all of it back to her twice, and then she went and stood in her own doorway and shouted 4 doors down in Ga until they opened, one after another like a row of lamps coming on. By 9 that night, the book had 31 names in it. The cream car found him in the lane at 10. Danso got out himself, unhurried, sunglasses still on in the dark, and the smell of him arrived half a second before he did. Bergamot, birch smoke, money. Exactly as it had on the first day under the mural. "You have been busy," he said warmly, and he meant it. "I admire it. I was you once," with a notebook. He looked at the exercise book under Elias's arm the way a man looks at a child's drawing on a fridge. "A school place in New York. A studio with a roof that does not leak. A stipend. And a very good lawyer for your friend. A real one, not that girl in the shipping container." The smile widened. "Name your price. I will say yes, and we can both go to bed." "No," Elias said. Danso smiled and waited comfortably because, in his long experience, no was not a refusal but an opening position, and opening positions had prices attached to them. The lane was quiet. Somewhere behind a wall, a radio was playing High Life. Then, when nothing else came, something moved behind the sunglasses. The first entirely honest thing Elias had ever watched him do. "You think this is about a boy?" Danso said. And the velvet had gone out of his voice, and what lay underneath was flat and bored and very much older. "There are 11,000 square meters of seafront under those roofs. It has been mine on paper since March. He is a delay." He got back into the car. "They are all delays," he said, and the window went up. Ruby's face on the screen at midnight, kitchen light behind her, head wrap gone crooked the way it only ever went when she had not slept. "He is home from the hospital," she said. "He is stubborn. He is asking after you." Not out loud, but he moved your chair back to the table. Behind her, out of frame, the cough. Twice, the way it always came. The second one longer than the first. Elias sat on a Kosua's step with the compass open on his knee, watching the needle swing north and settle, swing north and settle, north and settle. And he did not tell his mother that he would not be on Sunday's flight, partly because it would break her, and partly because he did not yet know that it was true. Dawn on the second day, and the seafront wall was still wrong. 40 meters of it, rolled flat in municipal gray, the exact dead shade they use on culverts and the backs of government buildings. 50 boats had lived on that wall. A woman with a basket on her head. A man with locks holding a seedling, 4 stories high, and a small figure at his feet that Elias had once recognized as himself, with his whole chest standing beside the man who had put him there. Now there was a gray rectangle and gulls and the smell of the tide. And under the gray, the wall was slightly, unmistakably uneven, the way a face is uneven under a hand pressed flat across it. He put his palm on it. Under the flat roller work, every ridge was still there. The raised lip, where the indigo had gone on thick and proud, the tooth of the ochre, the small crater where Quasi had thrown a brush at the wall in August and laughed about it for a week afterwards. A whole coastline of texture that one afternoon of gray could cover and could not erase. Quasi had told him this in the first week, and he had thought at the time that it was simply a beautiful thing to say. It was not a beautiful thing to say. It was a fact about pigment, and about ground, and about people. The earth still remembered. You only had to know where to put your hand. Efua spread 3 land titles across the container floor and knelt over them in her good blazer, which she did not appear to think about. The surveyor's mark, here, here, and here. Elias got down beside her. The first two were cramped and hurried, made by a man doing his 9th sight of the day in the heat with somewhere else to be. The third was beautiful, even, centered, unhurried, every loop closed. A man forging a document, Efua said, is the only man in the entire chain who is trying. Everybody else is bored. That is how you catch him. He does it too well. Then the satisfaction went out of her face. Now I need the original from the registry, and the registry is staffed by people who owe Danso money. The Lands Commission counter in Accra was a formica shelf, and a woman behind it who had said no 1,100 times that year and had refined it into something close to an art form. File closed for review. Come back Monday. Monday was 3 days past Friday, and every person standing at that counter knew it. Elias felt the old, useless heat come up the back of his neck. The same heat that had walked him chest-deep into the Atlantic 6 weeks ago with his shoes still on. And Efua laid 2 fingers on his forearm without turning her head, and he stood there and let it move through him and out of him and said nothing at all. It was, he thought later, the first genuinely useful thing he had ever done with his own temper. So he stopped arguing and started looking, which was the only skill this country had actually taught him. And on the shelf behind her, folded under a stack of ledgers where somebody kept the things that were theirs, there was a strip of adinkra cloth, hand-stamped, black on russet, the real thing, the stiff kind you can only get in Entonso. My friend's grandmother dyed cloth in Entonso, he said. He grinds his own indigo out of leaves. He is in a cell in Cape Coast, and on Friday they are going to ask him to agree that he is a crime. The woman's hands stopped moving on the keyboard. She looked up at him properly for the first time. "Which wall?" she said. "Which wall did he paint?" She gave them a certified copy at 10 to 5, stamped, initialed, entirely legal, and told them pleasantly that she had done nothing whatsoever and would deny it with great warmth. In the container that night, Efua read it twice under the lamp and set it down, and the set of her jaw was the first bad news of a good day. "It is forged. I can prove that to any magistrate in this country." She took the glasses off. "I cannot prove who forged it. A copy is not a confession. Danso has never signed a document in his life. Not the titles, not the transfers, not one line of it. That is not luck. That is the whole architecture of the man. He builds rooms he is never standing in." She looked up. "Which is why all of it now depends on a woman in Ada." They had moved Kwesi to Cape Coast. Behind the grill, his mouth was worse, and he had stopped bothering to pretend it was nothing. "They brought the paper again this morning," he said. "Sign it, plead, 18 months, and the seafront question goes quiet for a generation and everybody's cousin keeps his job." He shrugged with one shoulder, the way he did on scaffolding when a wall was not going the way he wanted it to go. The officer was kind about it. He has family in Bukom. He told me it was the sensible thing and he was not lying, and that is the part I cannot get out of my teeth. Elias's hands were on the bars again. "Did you sign it?" Kwesi looked at him a long moment through the metal. "Not yet," he said. "Sign it," Elias said, "and I will paint that wall myself. Badly. 40 meters of it, and every single person in Jamestown will walk past it every day for 30 years knowing that you let me." Kwesi laughed, really laughed, the enormous wrong sound of it going away down the corridor, and a guard turned around to look. Then he stopped all at once. "You know exactly what I am," he said. I love this city more than I love my own safety. You worked that out in the first week and you stayed anyway. And that was your choice. And I have never once apologized for it. He put 2 fingers through the grill and did not quite touch him. So do not ask me to be careful now, seedling. Ask me to be right. Outside the station, Elias stood in the white 4 o'clock afternoon and shook. It was not the flailing, drowning, useless anger of the hill. This one had edges and a direction and somewhere to put itself down. Standing on that step in a town he had first seen 11 days ago, he understood something about himself that would not leave him again, that he was not, and had never been, a boy who simply felt things too enormously. He was a man with a notebook, a lawyer, a hard drive, 31 names in 3 days. Silas had spent 18 years trying to pour him into a mold and calling the failure disobedience. It turned out the mold had never been the problem. Nobody had ever handed him anything worth building. KJ posted at 7 that evening. 90 seconds of the raid, no music, no caption but a date and a location, and then a still photograph of a gray rectangle where a mural used to be. By midnight, it had gone past Ghana. By morning, a Nigerian outlet had it, and a diaspora account in London with 400,000 followers. And somebody had dug out the original mural photograph and set the 2 images side by side, and the comments were doing what comments do. Some of it astonishingly beautiful, some of it vile, all of it loud. Now they cannot do it quietly, KJ said, watching the number climb. He did not look triumphant. He looked like a man who had just made himself permanently visible on purpose in a country where that is a decision with a cost attached. They came for Akosua at 9 the next morning. 2 men with a clipboard and a municipal lanyard, very polite, here about the structural integrity of the compound wall which had stood since 1974 and had outlived a husband. Akosua gave them water. She gave them the good chairs. She answered every question with the unhurried courtesy of a woman who has buried 1 man and raised 4 other people's children, and she walked them to the gate herself and thanked them for their trouble. Then she stood alone in the middle of her own swept yard with her hands shaking and said, to nobody in particular, 41 years I have kept this gate open. Elias stood in the doorway behind her and understood completely that he had carried this to her door on his own 2 feet. He went out at noon to tell the seafront it was no longer safe to be in the book. He managed 4 houses. By the 5th, Na Dede was already out on her step with 2 women standing either side of her, and before he had opened his mouth, she said, "We heard. Bring the book." They had known about the inspection before he had finished walking there. That is what a lane is. That is the entire technology of it. And it did not empty the book. It filled it. By dark, there were 79 names, and the boy of 14 had made a second copy in his own careful handwriting and hidden it in a different house in case the first one was ever taken, which was an idea that nobody had given him. She called at 5 in the morning and said 1 word, "Ada," and hung up. The Trotro left at 1/2 with 14 people and a rooster in a basket, and Elias sat with his knees against the seat in front and the exercise book flat against his chest, holding it the way you carry something breakable through a crowd, palm, salt flat, palm. A woman fell asleep on his shoulder, and he let her. A boy sold plantain chips through the window at a police barrier, and the officer waved them through without looking up. The compass in his pocket went on insisting north the whole way, patiently, uselessly. and he went on going east. And somewhere past Sage, it occurred to him that he had stopped asking the needle for permission. He found her at the estuary in the last of the afternoon, sitting on an overturned canoe with her bare feet in the sand, and she was not the woman from the hill. No gold anywhere, no tailoring, cotton, faded, borrowed from somebody with wider shoulders, her hair down and unstyled and going its own way in the wind off the water. She saw him coming from a long way off across the flat. There is nowhere to hide out there, and neither of them tried. And she did not get up, and she did not run. When he was close enough to hear her over the water, she said, without turning her head, "He took the house. He took the car. He left the child." The tide went in and out. Elias sat down on the sand 3 feet from her because his legs had stopped agreeing to hold him up. He did not tell her that it was all right. It was not all right. A man was in a concrete room with a split mouth, and a wall was gray, and Akosua's hands had shaken in her own yard after 41 years of an open gate. And he discovered, sitting there watching the Volta argue with the Atlantic, that he was not actually required to forgive her in order to need her, that the two were entirely separate operations, and it was the most adult thought he had ever had in his life. "They are asking him to sign 18 months, he said. "Friday, 10 o'clock. "I know," Amma said. "I have known since Tuesday." "You want me to say that I am sorry," she said. "I am not going to perform it for you on a beach." She kept watching the water. "I was 24 when I married a man I love and cannot want, in a country that would have taken us both apart if we had stood alone. 8 years of being a wall. Do you know what that is? To be somebody's architecture? You are load-bearing, and you are invisible, and nobody has ever thanked a wall." Her hand went flat on her belly. "Then a rich man told me I could stop being a wall and be a wife instead, and I believed him because I was tired. And tired is not a crime, though everyone will decide that it was." She looked at him. "I told you on the hill, I am not the flood. I am the woman who felt the ground go soft first." The house was 2 rooms and a swept yard and had been shut up for 4 years, and it smelled of dust and dried fish and a dead woman's soap. Amma went straight to a cupboard, moved a tin of milk powder that had expired in 2016, and took out a folder wrapped in cloth against the damp. Thick, swollen, soft-edged with handling, bound in fraying string. She stood holding it against herself for a moment in the half-dark, and Elias understood that she was saying goodbye to the only power she had ever had. "There's an account number on page 40, she said. "He opened it in my name in 2017. He has never signed anything in his life. He signed me instead." They came out into a blue evening, and there were headlights at the top of the track. Not one set. 3. Sitting still, engines running, a long way back where the road came down off the ridge. Patient, in no hurry at all. The way you park when you know the person you have come for has nowhere to be. Amma did not gasp, and she did not scream. She said, in an ordinary voice, the way you might mention rain, "He has had a man on my mother's house since June." Then she pushed the folder hard against Elias's chest with the flat of her hand. "The river path," she said. "Now, do not wait for me, and do not look back." They ran. Reeds and black water on the left, a low earth bank on the right, the ground going soft and then hard and then soft again under his feet. The folder jammed inside his shirt against his ribs and his arms crossed over it like a man carrying a child through fire. Behind them, doors, boots, a torch beam swinging wild across the reeds and finding nothing and swinging back. Amma ran barefoot, and she ran well, one hand under her belly, and she did not make a single sound. And it was the silence of her, more than anything behind them, that told Elias exactly how frightened she was. The path lifted onto a bluff above the estuary where the bank had been eaten away underneath by 40 years of water, and there was a moon on the flat, and for about 11 seconds there was nothing in the world but breathing. Elias got a hand back for her. She got a hand out. And then the light came up the path behind them, and she turned her head to look at it. 1/2 second, the oldest mistake there is. And the edge she was standing on had not been there for 4 years. It did not look like anything. That was the thing he could never afterwards make anybody understand. There was no cry and no scramble. The ground simply stopped being ground, and Amma went down the face of the bluff with the whole soft, collapsing weight of it coming after her. And the sound she made when she landed on the packed sand and stone at the bottom was small and flat and entirely final. And then the reeds went on moving in the wind exactly as they had been moving before. He got down to her somehow. She was on her side with her cheek in the wet sand and her eyes open. And when he tried to lift her, she made a sound that stopped him instantly and completely. "Don't," she said. And then, with a terrible practicality, as though she had already run the arithmetic and did not have time to run it twice. Page 40, the account. Say it out loud in the room twice so they have to write it down twice. Her hand came up and closed on his shirt, on the folder underneath it, hard. "I was not only this," she said. "Tell somebody I was not only this." The torches were on the ridge above them. She let go of his shirt and said, "Go." And Elias, who would carry this for the rest of his life, in a garden in Harlem, on a rooftop in Dumbo, in every room he ever organized, went. He lay in the reeds in the black water for 2 hours with the folder held up out of it on the flat of his hands, and listened to men walk the bank above him with torches, and heard one of them say, quite clearly and without any particular feeling, that there was a woman down on the sand and that it was a shame about the road being what it was out here. When they had gone, he walked 11 kilometers in the dark to the main road with his shirt soaked through. And he did not cry because the thing in his chest had not yet worked out how, and it would take 9 years and a man on a rooftop before it did. Ifua opened the container door at 4 in the morning to a boy covered to the chest in estuary mud, holding a wrapped folder out in front of him with both hands like an offering. She did not say a word for a long moment. Then she took it, set it on the desk, and listened to the whole of it. And when he got to the bluff, she closed her eyes and kept them closed until he had finished. "I am going to say something that will sound monstrous," she said at last. "And I want you to understand I am saying it because she would have said it first." She put her hand flat on the folder. "Yesterday, this was a stolen file from a discredited woman. This morning, it is a dying declaration. They killed the only witness who could have been cross-examined, and in doing it, they made her unanswerable." They worked until 3 in the morning, the 3 of them and the generator. Ifua built the argument in a hand nobody else on earth could read. KJ matched his timestamps against the payment dates, one by one, saying each number out loud twice. Elias read 400 names into the room so that Ifua could hear which ones would carry weight and which ones would not. Near the end, she stopped writing and said to both of them, "I want to be honest with you. This works if the magistrate would rather be remembered than paid. That is the whole of it. That is what we are walking in there with." Nobody answered her. Outside, the tide came up the seawall and went back down again exactly as it had every night for 1,000 years, entirely indifferent. And somehow, that was the thing that finally let Elias sleep. Friday, 9:40 in the morning. The magistrate's court at Cape Coast seats perhaps 60 people. 240 came. They came in 3 trotros and a fishing lorry, and a great many of them came on foot. Na Dede in her good cloth, the boy of 14 with the second copy of the book buttoned inside his shirt. Men who had not left Jamestown in a decade and had needed to be told which bus. They filled the room and then the corridor and then the steps outside, and they were completely, deliberately, unnervingly silent. It was not the silence of people waiting to be told something. It was the silence of people who had already decided and had come to be counted while it happened. Danso's people arrived at 9:55, 3 of them, London-tailored, one-wheeled case of files, moving with the particular unhurried calm of men billing by the hour for a formality that had been settled in a room somewhere weeks ago. Danso himself did not come, and that absence was the loudest thing in the building. Across the aisle, Efua Asari sat alone at a bare table with one worn leather satchel and a school exercise book, and she did not look at them once. Elias, watching from the 3rd row, understood that not looking cost her something and that she had decided in advance to pay it, and that this was what discipline actually looked like when you saw it up close. They brought Kwesi up at 10 past. Indigo still driven under his nails, a fortnight of it now, refusing. He found Elias in the 3rd row in under 2 seconds, which meant that he had known exactly where to look before the door had even opened. The clerk read the charge in the flat, administrative voice of a man reading out a bus timetable, a public indecency offense, a date, a compound in Jamestown, and 240 people sat in that hot room and listened to a country say out loud, in an official voice, on an official morning, precisely what it believed that they were. Nobody moved. The ceiling fans went round. Somewhere at the back, a woman took hold of another woman's hand. The lead counsel rose and spoke for 4 minutes. A regrettable matter, a cooperative accused, a plea already prepared and initialed. He mentioned, lightly and twice, that the seafront redevelopment enjoyed municipal support and considerable public benefit, which nobody had asked him about and which was the only part he had come to say. Then he sat and adjusted his cuff. "Your worship," Efua said, "before my friend's plea is entered, the defense applies to place 4 documents before the court." And she set the folder down on the table. It made a sound, the flat, heavy slap of 200 pages of another man's bookkeeping landing on wood. And every person in that room heard it, and the smile stayed on the lead counsel's face for about a second and a half too long. She took them in order and without drama, because drama was not necessary. A surveyor's mark drawn too beautifully, a title dated March, on ground the court now had 400 sworn names for. A municipal inspector named with a date and a figure beside it. And then page 40, a payment authorizing overtime for 11 officers on the night of the raid, drawn on a numbered account opened in 2017. She read the account name aloud. Then she asked the court's indulgence and read it aloud a second time so that it would sit in the record twice. And Elias, in the third row, with estuary mud still in the seams of his only shoes, closed his eyes and did the one thing he had been asked to do. Then Afua called her witness, and a 19-year-old boy from Harlem stood up in a Ghanaian courtroom and described a bluff above the Volta and 3 sets of headlights and a woman who had run barefoot without making any sound at all, and what she had said with her cheek in the wet sand and her hand closed on his shirt. The room did not make a noise. The lead counsel rose to object and then visibly decided not to. The magistrate, 61 years old, 11 months from retirement, and everybody in that building had assumed, long since reached, read page 40 for a very long time. Then he put down his pen, and in a room that quiet a pen going down on wood is a gavel, he struck the charge as an abuse of process, referred the titles and the payment and the death of Ama Boateng to the Attorney General, and ordered the accused released. They brought Kwesi out through the side door into white afternoon, and the coast made a sound that Elias felt come up through the soles of his feet and into his chest. He did not run to him. That was the discipline of the entire 3 days, and he held it 4 seconds longer, standing on the courthouse step while a whole city put its hands on the man it had come for. Kwesi found him over the top of their heads. Neither of them moved toward the other, and every person there who needed to understand understood anyway. Then Na Dede, 81 years old, put her hand flat on Elias's back and left it there, and that was the only touch that happened in public that day, and it was enough, and he would remember the exact weight of it for the rest of his life. They went down to the water at the end of that day because there was nowhere else on earth for them to go. Kwesi brought the indigo with him. He ground it on the sand the way he had the night of the storm, leaves, water, patience. And without a word, he laid the old marks back down Elias's chest and ribs. Sankofa, go back and fetch what was left behind. Dwenemen, strength that stays gentle. Nyame Inti, and by God's grace. And somewhere in the middle of it, with the tide coming in the color of pewter and the sky gone low and grieving, the brush stopped, and the two of them took hold of one another in the wet sand and wept, openly, without any dignity at all, the way you can only weep in front of one person in a lifetime. For Ama on the sand at Ada. For a wall painted gray. For 11 days that had taken 9 years off them both. Neither said a word because they both already knew the other thing, the thing about Tuesday, and neither was willing to be the first to say it out loud. The moon came up over the water and turned the whole coast to pewter and salt. And when there was nothing left to cry with, the brush lay forgotten in the sand, and their bodies danced together under the glow of the soft moonlight. Slow and unhurried and reverent, 2 men learning each other by touch alone in the last hours they would ever have. The sea kept time. The indigo transferred from one chest to the other, mark by mark, until neither of them could have told you whose skin the pattern had started on. Sankofa on a shoulder that had not worn it an hour before, Dwenemen smudged across 2 rib cages at once. Afterwards, Elias lay with his ear over Kwesi's heart and listened to it the way you listen to a language you are about to stop hearing spoken. Gray light. The tide had come up and gone out again and taken most of the indigo with it, and what was left had dried into their skin in pieces, like a map of somewhere neither of them would ever go back to. Kwesi turned the compass over in his hands and pointed it deliberately north into the last of the dark. There, he said, your father is alive and refusing to say your name. Your mother is holding a pot for you, and there is ground up there that nobody at all is counting." Elias started to argue, and Kwesi stopped him, not with a hand, with his voice. "I am Jamestown. I do not transplant. I hold this wall up, and when I am gone, somebody's grandson holds it up." He closed Elias's fingers around the brass, one at a time, and would not let go of them. "But you were never mine to keep, seedling. You were mine to teach." The sea came in and went out. "I will always love you. That is not a thing you carry. It is a thing that stays exactly where it happened and holds the ground down so that you are free to go." He left on a Tuesday, the way people leave, badly, and too early in the morning, and with the wrong things packed. Ruby cried down the phone and told him to come home. Silas took the receiver out of her hand and spent 4 sentences on him, and the last of them was that a son who chooses another man's coast over his own father's sickbed should not expect a room to be made up. And he meant it, and he would go on meaning it for 9 years, through a garden and a rooftop and a solemn, watchful boy named Leo he would never once be introduced to. At the gate, the phone buzzed. KJ, a photograph of the seafront wall, bamboo scaffolding lashed up its whole length, 40 meters of municipal gray already half stripped back. 11 people standing on planks with rollers and buckets of hand-ground ochre and indigo, and color crawling out across that wall again like something coming back up through soil after a long dry season. Small at the bottom of the frame, one figure with blue hands directing traffic. The caption was 3 words long. Come see it. London to New York, seat 34A, and 36,000 feet of black water underneath him. The boy who had flown out of Kotoka in August with a green canvas backpack, a mother's envelope, and no earthly idea what his hands were for, was going home with pigment worked permanently under 2 fingernails, a school exercise book with 400 names in it, a brass compass that had finally stopped needing to be consulted, and a woman's last sentence lodged somewhere under his ribs where he would keep it, unrepeated for 9 years. He was asleep before the seatbelt sign went off, and somewhere out over the Atlantic he woke to a warm, spiced smell that had no business being on an aeroplane at 4 in the morning. Neroli and jasmine, soft, deliberate, expensive, and found that the young man in the aisle seat, neat cornrows, a dancer's easy sprawl, one gold hoop catching the reading light, had been watching him for some time and was in no particular hurry to stop. "You talk in your sleep," the stranger said, and smiled, slowly, the way weather arrives. Something about a wall. He put out his hand. "Maurice."
I wanna be with you.